as everyone knew, he had a lot of enemies, but there was no one he hated worse than James Buchanan. He once said that there was no such person as James Buchanan. There was only a steaming mass of putridity. But he was almost as fond as your pick for your second vice president, Andrew Johnson. And I wondered what sort of counseling he may have given you on that subject.
Well, you were saying about the 15th Amendment. One nice thing about Lincoln, I only go up to April the 15th of 1865. That saves me a world of difficulties. But I thought he was, I tried to get along with everybody, and that was my job. I understood that I had zealots on the right and on the left. I mean, we weren't doing enough against slavery. Let's not do too much. And it's not, so you had to I'm trying to navigate a middle ground. And that takes some doing sometimes. But he had a sharp whip. I remember a lady asked him for some piece of his hair, and he took off his wig and threw it to her. He was quite a guy. Other than that, I have to rely on my staff.
Go ahead, Mr. President.
Mr. President, in 1858, you ran for the Senate against your friend Stephen Douglas. If you had won, would you have run for president in 1860?
I probably wouldn't. My lifetime goal was really to be in the Senate. That's what I wanted to do. I had 2 cracks at it and didn't make it either time. And I was at home licking my wounds when they asked me to Jesse Feld, the head of the Illinois Republican Nominating Convention, came to my house and said that I was now a national man and that he would like me to, put us up as a favorite son of Illinois. And I was really surprised. And I said, well, there's other men more qualified than me, men like Seward and Chase who have long records. And he said, no, that's just the kind, I have none. He said, that's just the kind of man we want. That's when I accused Mary of putting something in his water. So I was surprised, really, that was offered the opportunity.
Mr. President, why in 1864 did you choose Andrew Johnson of all people?
It made sense at the time. He was governor in the military, ran from Tennessee. He's the only person that kept his Senate seat. He was a Democrat, and of course, in the election of 1864, we weren't called the Republican Party, we were called the Union Party, because we wanted everybody in there. And that would be a good way to say, this is why we're the Union Party. So here's a person from the South, from Tennessee, make him vice president. And Hannibal Hamlin didn't want any parts of it. He wanted to go home. So it sounded like, on the surface was good. So it wasn't.
Steve.
Mr. President, how trustworthy was that Pinkerton guy in getting you information on what was going on out in the field?
Well, I know that rumor had it that he liked large estimates. But he was, at that time, he gave me some needed advice and counsel that he had heard that it was going to be a time in my life. So, but I think later on, he was known for giving, which actually played into McClellan's hands in terms of being outnumbered 4-1.
A little exaggerated.
Guys are tough. This is tough.
Any more questions for our commander in chief? Hold on here a second.
Okay, can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
Okay, first question is, you mentioned our former governor, Simon Cameron, and you sacked him. He was like either the first or one of the first cabinet members that you fired. And
I
was
didn't
it
fire him.
okay?
No. He gave him another opportunity.
Okay. But what was it you didn't want? Did you not want him to serve in your cabinet anymore? And if so, why?
I think he felt he was an administrator. And I think he felt he was in over his head. Now, the Army went from, 6,000 to 600,000, and all that, of those contracts had to be let. And Congress wasn't in session. Now, his problem was, he didn't have a good handle on it. A congressman in Ohio told me that whenever he asked Cameron a position on a bill, he'd look around for a piece of paper, get a piece of paper, ask to borrow your pen, make himself a note, put the paper in one thing and your pen in the other. But they were going to censor him. And I learned that Congress and the Senate were going to censor him because of injurious contracts and negative to the union. I wrote an open letter to both houses saying, those contracts, alleged contracts, were caused by the extraordinary conditions that the fall of Fort Sumter. Congress wasn't in session, and we had to make these decisions to get the money in. And he didn't just make it; we all made it. So if you're going to censor him, you're going to censor myself and the entire cabinet. And they removed the censure.
And then my second question is.
Oh, I thought that. Wait a minute.
My second question is, in your brief remarks at Gettysburg, near the end of your speech, you referred to a new birth of freedom. Were you specifically referring to an end of slavery?
Yes.
Or if not, what else were you referring to?
That's a new birth. Yes.
At the start of the Civil War, it was common, you referred to this nation as the Union. Towards the end of the war, it became the nation. At what point did you make that change in your mind?
From working as a union and the nation, well, again, I would say the Emancipation Proclamation. When I come up with the Emancipation Proclamation, when I couldn't get the border states to have gradual elimination of slavery, then I was left with, to me, my only choice was as Commander-in-Chief to do those in Southern hands. And I thought at that point, now we're talking nation. Yeah.
Very important distinction.
Yeah. Steve. Be nice, you're my table.
Okay, Mr. President, we really haven't talked much about the Army. I'm very interested in any comments you would have regarding McClellan.
How much time do we have? He, I guess one of my biggest regrets was giving him 2 cracks at it. And I should have put Grant in sooner, I'm sure of that. But, when you're away from headquarters, and Halleck was taking credit for it, so I didn't know it was Grant. But he had, to his credit, he was, good administrator, drilling of the troops, passing troops in review, good for morale. The soldiers liked him. He just had the slows. I couldn't get him to move. I tried everything, I wrote him a letter saying, if you're not going to use the Army, can I borrow it for a while? General Order number 1, he had to move by a certain date in February. And then after the battle, when I had to replace him after Antietam, he didn't follow Lee. And so that's when I had to replace him. Yeah. Sent him back to New Jersey. They never voted for me.
He's coming around.
Back to the Emancipation Proclamation for a minute. You mentioned that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued as a military necessity. Also, it's a moral issue. How much of it was a moral issue and how much of it was a military necessity?
Well, the thing was, it didn't matter, it said whether it was moral or not. Why was I doing it? Why did I limit it to just those currently in rebellion? And, and why did it read like a bill of lading? because I was expecting, if I tried to put that anywhere else except those still in rebellion, it could go into the courts, and it would win its way in the courts and go up to the Supreme Court. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was Roger B. Taney. He had the Dred Scott decision. So that's why I felt as Commander-in-Chief, if I kept it right to that, to those portions of state and states currently in rebellion, on state constitutional grounds. But I've always felt that, that it was a moral question. My parents were anti-slavery. That's one of the reasons we left Kentucky and went to Indiana, was over the issue of slavery. But as president, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. My personal views, it's the Constitution I'm protecting as president.
Mr. President, enjoyed your talk very much, and you made a brief aside about General Grant. I've always been a Grant man, loved him from the start. Would you go a little bit more into your relationship with him and how much you think he helped bring about the end of the war?
Well, Grant was tremendous, and he understood. As soon as I made him in charge, he understood that our war strategy, that we blockade all the southern ports so that war materials couldn't enter and cotton couldn't leave. And we take control all along the Mississippi River. Okay, so therefore separate Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana from the rest of the Confederacy, and then we were attacked simultaneously all along the line to take advantage of our superior numbers. And Grant did that. He put Sherman in charge of the West, and then they both attacked at the same time. And I had people telling me that he drank too much, and I had Dana, Under Secretary of War, understand, go out and look, spend some time with him, and reported back that that wasn't true. And that's when I came up with the next time I heard it, well, maybe I should send a case of his favorite whiskey to all the other generals. Truly, just he was a savior, I think. I had complete confidence in him, and he knew. I knew he didn't have any presidential aspirations, so I knew that he had dogged determination. It's like he took land, he got it like he inherited it. And he didn't go back to Washington, after the wilderness, campaign. Everybody thought they'd go back. No, keep going. Keep pushing, trying to get lit. So he understood. He understood.
Any other questions?
Mr. Lincoln, we hear that you like to spend parts of the summer at the Soldiers' Home outside of Washington, D.C. I wonder that time when you would spend there with your family, surrounded by soldiers, what impact did that have on you?
Well, my wife Mary was very instrumental in trying to get me to not relieve the stress. She made sure that I had a carriage ride every day around 4 o'clock so I could decompress. So she was a tremendous help, but she never got a good press. She was considered a Western woman by the Eastern press, and they just didn't like her. And then of course, she wanted me home, and my law partner, Herndon, he wanted me working. My secretaries, Hay and Nicolay, wanted me in the office, so they were often in loggerheads. And but Mary never wrote a history. Herndon wrote a history. Hay and Nicolay wrote a history, and guess what? Mary didn't come out right. And historians will know that they picked that up, and that's where her reputation came from. She was a tremendous help to me in the pressure.
Yeah, I have a question related to your medical health. I don't think I need that.
You need it for Zoom. For the people on Zoom.
I have a question related to your medical condition, your medical health. I understand you had Morphan's disorder, and you were in a great deal of pain throughout your presidency. Could you share what kind of medication you were taking,
Yeah,
or you were being prescribed to try to alleviate.
I give a talk called Lies, Legends, and Myths. And one of them is that he didn't have Marfan's disease. But what happened was one West Coast doctor said that he had unusually long arms and legs, and therefore, he had Marfan's disease. Now, there was no cure for Marfan's, but if you wanted to get research dollars, if you could tie Lincoln to anything, you get the research dollars. But he didn't have any of the other characteristics for Marfan's. Siring father in his 60s, let's see some of the others. Very poor eyesight, heart trouble. So he didn't have any of those things, and so he really didn't have Marfan's. But they did get research dollars, and they worked on it. That was good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Had you been able to continue with your presidency, what would have been your next greatest vision for our nation?
Would you say that again, please?
What would have been your continuing or next greatest vision for our nation?
Reconstruction and the way in which it was handled. My war strategy and my proclamation of amnesty and reconstruction that I sent out in December of '63 dealt with how to bring the states back into the Union. And my overall philosophy was let them up easy. Let them up easy. So under my plan, all it was necessary for a state to come back into the Union was for just 10% of the people who voted in 1860 to swear a loyalty oath to the government, the Constitution, and the Proclamation. And the entire state can come back in with all their rights, all their privileges, all their property, minus any slaves, of course. Now, after my death, they got a little more draconian. But I think the next thing would have been to bring us back together. And we were talking on the second inaugural, with malice towards none, with charity for all. That was a tone that we wanted to have, so that people could get rid of the hatred and the vindictiveness, and heal this country.
Could we use that today?
Pardon me?
Could we use that today?
Like I say, only go up to 1865.
Good answer. Well, that may be a good place to stop. But that's not the end of our program for this evening. First of all, Mr. President, would you stand over here in front of our banner? We have a few presentations we'd like to make.
As a member of the Harrisburg Roundtable, we give our speakers this paperweight, so you can put it on your desk, Mr. President. And Steve's going to take a picture here. And look at Steve. Good.
And our Vice President, Mark Blanchard, also has a presentation to make.
Present you another gift. To James Haney from your friends at the Harrisburg Civil War Roundtable, with gratitude for bringing Lincoln back to life.
Okay, well, thanks again, Mr. President.